I'm going to introduce our next presenter, and that young man is Ryan Washington. And Ryan Washington is my youngest son, uh, coincidental. And he has volunteered at the last minute to step in for my oldest son's Dwayne Lewis, Pastor Dwayne Lewis. He's out of town. He couldn't make it back in time. So Ryan volunteered to step up for him. And Ryan has a number of talents that I'm proud of. I watched him come up as a little boy to the man he is now, and I'm very proud of it. And so, Ryan, I'd like for you to come up and say a few words to the audience here.
All right. So, it is a blessing and a gift to be here with you all today. I'm going to be talking about mental health for Black men because it's one of the biggest things that I feel don't get talked about enough. Oftentimes, Black men's mental health is overlooked because Black men are supposed to be strong naturally. We're not supposed to cry. We're not supposed to have certain emotions. We're supposed to just grind it out every single day, do what we're supposed to do. And our emotions just get put on the sideline, they get put in the back burner, and they're never acknowledged, or it's oftentimes that they just don't get enough acknowledgement in general. And so that leads to a lot of men, a lot of Black men not knowing how to process their own emotions, not knowing how to create a connection within their family because they're always working. Right? Not knowing how to create a connection with their partner because they feel so burdened with a lot of the responsibilities that life has given them. And so I'm here today to talk about the responsibility as Black men that we have for other Black men and to support them in the things that other people don't see and the biggest stressors that a lot of people don't see that Black men have to carry based on generational trauma that we don't necessarily address in the way that it needs to be addressed. And so I would say that one of the biggest things that I see from coaching men and coaching Black men is the fact that they run into issues with being able to feel sadness and accept it, to be able to feel anger and accept it. I can ask a lot of you men in here today, where did you learn to manage your anger? How did you learn to manage your anger? What did you learn how to do? Most likely, stuff it down, avoid it, leave it for another day. Or just put it away in a nice little place where we don't have to look at it so that we can still show up for our families. And so what's missing in that? We lose our sense of connection to ourselves by not being able to acknowledge all of the emotions that we have in a daily life experience. I've noticed as well with a lot of the Black men who grow up in broken homes or have children in broken homes or have children where they're not with the partner anymore. That's where they they have the biggest challenges because they haven't necessarily learned how to connect with their child who is living in another household. So there's a lot of emotions that even come with that, right? How do we learn how to process the emotions that we have around a partner that it didn't work out with, but we still need to show up for the child, right? Where do we learn how to do that? Well, it's whatever was modeled by our parents, our mom, our dad, their parents, their mom, their dad, and what's been the hereditary thing that's happened over time, right? You can even look in society today how in certain neighborhoods, the male's not allowed to be on the premises, right? Especially in a lot of the low-income neighborhoods. The male isn't allowed to live there. It's the woman only. So what are they doing naturally? Separating the home. How's the male processing this? Abandonment. The males typically see being left outside as feeling abandoned. And so what does that do? It doesn't help them process any of the emotion. So what do we have to do instead? We have to push it away, and we don't talk about it, right? It comes out in other ways. It comes out in murders. It comes out in gangs and relating with other people that have the same pain but don't have the same solutions, right? So the problem isn't that black men have trauma. The problem is, how do we address that trauma in a way that's going to be supportive to the black man and his kids and his kids' kids? So there's a cycle that we have to change, and it's a cycle that we can't rely on the government to handle. It's not a cycle that we can rely on other cultures to handle, as much as they've modeled something different, right? We can look at the Hispanic community, and no matter what, they have 10 to 15 people in a household. How often do you see that within black communities, right? It's kind of rare. And if it's so, it's most likely the mom and the kids. The dad is not there. So we have to begin to start learning how to build a culture of connection. Because right now we have a large sense of disconnection within our communities. So how do we do that? The first thing is to start talking about it. The first thing is to start having conversation of, hey, this is what we see. We're not blaming you for the position that we're in, but we just want to acknowledge, hey, this is the position that we're in right now. This is what we're looking at. We're looking at a lot of households that don't have a lot of black men in them, right? We're seeing a lot of black men that are going to other things that aren't supporting black culture or black communities in the way of rising it up. So the first thing is to have the conversation, but the second thing is to bring people in who have a level of empathy that look like them and have solutions for them. What's one of the biggest things that black people in general avoid? And that's therapy. That's coaching, right? That's the things that I do. When I was in my training, I was the only black male. I was the only black person. Now, there was 2 black people. I was the only black male. Right? Why is that? What causes us to not want to look at the traumas that we have in our lives? Is it learned behavior? Is it because our families have said that you don't need to go to therapy, you're stronger than that, you can be more resilient than that? Or is it something else? Is it because it gets scrutinized, or people have a certain bias towards you're not going to get the type of care that you need, or you're going to have to go to a white therapist and they're not going to be able to relate to your problems, right? So what are the stories that we're already telling ourselves that are not true, that are preventing us from getting the help that we need to support the communities that we have, right? So no matter how many times we do different events, if we don't have the buy-in from the younger community, the community that's going to be running everything in the next 20 years, then everything that we're doing is for naught. So it's, what can we do now to begin to build a sense of connection with the younger community who's hurting and doesn't know how to share their pain with other people, right? The biggest thing that we can do is not only be a model or a role model for these people, for these kids, and especially for these young men, but we get to have more conversations with them and tell them that, hey, it's okay that you're hurting. It's okay that you're angry because dad's not in the house. It's okay that you can be angry, or you can be sad, or you can cry because you want a different lifestyle that you're having, that you're comparing yourself to your other white counterparts and wondering why they're getting ahead of you. Acknowledge the feelings that are there so that then we can process things and move forward. Think about this. When you have a kid and the child is upset, what works versus what doesn't work, right? If a kid is upset, you can't just say, you know what, you're good. Just be quiet, you're safe, you're fine, don't worry about it, you're good. What does that do to a child? Yep. Right? They get bigger, they get more angry, right? Because they're not heard, they're not seen, they're not felt. Right? And that's the same thing that we're dealing with in our communities now. People aren't heard, They aren't seen, they aren't felt. The government is essentially giving them solutions that's not actually solving the problem, but that's giving the sense of, it's okay, no, you're fine, you're good, let's soothe this. Let's just soothe it for now. So what's missing is that empathetic part that we all missed out on, that a lot of us missed out on during childhood, during those earlier ages, right? Of, you know what, it's okay to feel that way. You know, I get it. I understand that you're angry. You know, let's find a solution together. You know, let me hear you. Let me see you. Let me experience what you're going through. And that's how we reach the other community. That's how we reach the younger crowd. That's how we reach people in a way that they felt heard, seen, acknowledged, and they don't feel the number one thing that a lot of our communities feel, which is abandonment, right? Because we project a lot of the abandonment that we have seen even through childhood onto other people, onto other environments, and we essentially make this the outcome for a lot of the situations that we're going through, even if it doesn't have to be the outcome. I call this the wolf that we feed. Wherever we place our attention is also what we are going to get the result of. It's always going to be similar. So if we grow up thinking that we aren't good enough, that even if I do this thing, nobody's going to see me, nobody's going to hear me, I'm going to feel abandoned, we're going to place that projection on every other person in our lives. And we're also going to place that on every other opportunity that we have. So we're going to completely reject ourselves naturally before anyone else even gets an opportunity to see us. And how many times in our communities do we even see that now? Where kids don't even give themselves an opportunity to be successful. Oh, I'm not even going to go to school anymore. It's not worth it. Right? Oh, I'm going to just go over here and do this thing because I can make money over here. Right? So they're not being heard, seen, experienced in a way that is going to be supportive to their life, to their growth, to their opportunities, because they haven't been modeled what opportunities and what creating opportunities can look like. Yeah. So then what do? How do we move forward? Right? I think one of the biggest things that we can do is at least taking maybe 1 to 2 kids under our wing. It could be a weekly conversation. It could be a every couple of weeks conversation, especially I would say personally, any black man, if they could have 1 to 2 kids that they talk to that they're not related to, or that they are related to, doesn't necessarily matter, and just hear them. Just give that child a space where they can be heard, felt, seen, and experienced in a different way. That's what changes things, right? We begin to build what's called the web of influence. You impact one person, that person impacts another person, that other person may impact 2 to 3 people. So we need to look at it in the form of we're planting seeds to grow trees that will never sit under their shade, right? We have to make it bigger than ourselves. And so when it comes to mental health is a community crisis. It's not individual. And when it comes to mental health, most people, 99% of people already feel alone and ashamed for how they feel. They feel ashamed for what they've done in their past, right? They feel burdened by those situations that they had in their past. And so if we can remove that burden, if just one person out of their life can remove that burden and say, hey, it's okay. You know, I got you, I'm here. That can completely change that child's or that adult's trajectory in life. Just by receiving that one bit of confidence from another person that they never got, that they really wanted when they were younger, or when they really wanted it just at any point in time in their life. So if we can be a bigger impact just by impacting one other person, it could even be your neighbor, do that. Take the 5 to 10 minutes to ask, how are you really feeling today? And don't go for the, I'm good, I'm fine, because that's a cover-up, right? We've been covering up those feelings for a long time. So ask the real question, how are you really feeling? Awesome. Questions or thoughts?
When we approach a parent about mentoring their child, um, usually you'll get some negativity there.
Mhm.
And so what would be our approach after receiving the negativity?
Mhm. Yeah, typically there's a concern that the other parent has that they're not speaking about. So it's getting to the the root of their concern, right? So it could simply be number one, acknowledgement. I always say acknowledgement. Hey, I hear you. You know, thank you for sharing that. And number two is getting to the fear. Well, what are you afraid will happen if, you know, I mentor in a certain way, or if we take this route? What are you afraid will happen? And once you can get to that question, you can also get to the fear. Oh, I'm afraid that, you know, they're not going to get what they need. Oh, okay. So you really care about how this child gets mentored. So what are the things that you really want for them, or what do you want them to really get out of a mentorship? So you can essentially lead them to a sense of safety to make the decision, right? So, and then you can also speak to the number one concern that parent has.
So can you share information about your business, how people can reach out to you and contact you?
Absolutely. My website is consciousconnectionacademy.com, and I specialize in childhood trauma coaching, PTSD, anxiety, depression, and specifically recently I've been starting to work with kids between the ages of 9 and 16, and I help them with anxiety, depression, and some of their ADHD challenges. And I also have an Instagram, conscious.ryan, and I'm also on an app called Insight Timer, where I facilitate breath work and meditation practices to help individuals with stress, anxiety, and all the things. I teach people how to breathe. Yes, sir.
Since black males are basically systematically pushed out of the public school system, and the Great Society started by John F. Kennedy created a vacuum in which black men don't fit. When their women are living in public housing, daddy can't be there. How do you see that as cause and effect of what you perceive?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I look at it in two ways. There's things that are in our control, and there's things that are out of our control. If we focus so much on the things that are out of our control, we never create any solutions for the things that we can control. So the things that we can control are, how does that adult male deal with the stress of not being able to be in the household with that child? If we can address that directly, then we can also create more solutions of bringing the entire household together. Because if the community sees that, oh, these men aren't actually acting out, they're actually doing more for the children, then we're creating a model for change, right? So the key is to create a model for change, but it has to happen on an individual basis. So if an entire block of men, so if an entire block has families of women and children, and pretty much all of those men are going to the household every week, picking up the kids. They're going and playing with the kids. They're going and having get-togethers. What do you think that's going to do for the other half of the neighborhood? It's giving them a model that they've never seen before, right? It's also giving them permission to do the same thing. Most of the time, we're always waiting for permission to take an action of some sort. And so if we can just start facilitating some men, that's why it's each one teach one, right? If we can just start facilitating it a little bit, it can potentially start trickling. But it's going to take, once again, generations to do. So it's, once again, the planting the seed for the tree that you'll never see its shade. So it may happen in 2 to 3 generations, but it has to start now for it to even be something for 2 to 3 generations ahead of us. So, and think about it this way as well. This is exactly how the brain works. A lot of times the brain will come up with different models for what things look like based on a past history, right? We're always looking at the past to predict our future. So what are we creating now that's going to be the future that people look back on? Right? Are we creating continuous and perpetual separation by focusing on the things that we can't control? Or are we focusing on the things that we can control and having that be the example of the new model for the future? Yes, Dr. Lee.
First, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
This question and comment. We were going through COVID and death became a common feature in the classroom. Students were grappling with that. And oftentimes I would, they would come to me and say, either somebody back home got sick, like they were going to pull through, or even with them getting sick and all that concern and uncertainty. If they are students, it struck me that our young folks are dealing with trauma in a way that we didn't have to.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to pull back because it was impacting me in a way. I'm used to having one or maybe two students a semester that are really going through, but it's 75% of the class, and I didn't really know how to deal with it. My two daughters do the same type of work you're doing, they're counselors in Atlanta and Tampa. But what I was struggling with was I really didn't know where to send them, right? Because we had a counseling center on campus, but they were very much overwhelmed. But I didn't know what resources were available out here in the public for people of limited means. So I think one of the things that would be useful for me if I could get, just a list of something of the resources that were available. Because none of my students had insurance, they were living off of a little bit of financial aid, but that was something I thought that was critical for them to have access to it, just at most basic level. Me saying, okay, this is some places where you can go that you might get some help. So I guess my question in all of that is, what are some of the resources that are available for folks who are in meetings who might need to talk to someone?
Give them my information, number one. Also, if I'm going to be honest, I haven't found much. I haven't found much of anything. And that's our biggest problem. Because a lot of the counselors, like you said, they're taxed, they're overwhelmed, right? With it's challenging to work with so many people's emotions in a certain day, right? So we only have a certain amount of mental and emotional capacity. And so the biggest thing is to help them find someone who can be empathetic to where they are, because that's the main need, right? There's no real solution that you can give them. They're not looking for a solution, they're looking for empathy, right? Because them having the conversation with you, so there's nothing for you to do except for listen and say, hey, I'm here for you, I hear you. I imagine that's really hard to go through. I'm sorry that you're going through that.
I'm afraid that I won't tell them that it's jacked up, right? Because I don't have the training of somebody that's skilled at counseling. So typically I'll say go to the counseling center and see if they can get you in. But we can't flash them together. We can't take nobody else out.
I would say the app Insight Timer does have some resources on there as well.
Say it again.
Insight Timer. So it's a breathwork meditation yoga app that pretty much a lot of people go to find support. So besides BetterHelp, I would say that one would be the next best bet, especially if you're looking for something that is low cost / free. But honestly, there aren't a lot of resources, and I coach other therapists and psychotherapists, and a lot of them don't necessarily have the tool that we're looking for, because they're psychotherapists, but they're not grief counselors, right? So essentially what you're looking for is just a grief counselor that has the capacity to deal with a lot of people and ask the right questions.
I'll say this, I don't want to hold all the time. I've had students that have come to me and expressed the fact that they don't want to be here, and that's a red flag. And, let me walk you to the counseling section. This past couple of years, let me see that a lot of our students have been hurt. Life experiences. And of course, money is a thing too. It's a special kind of person to do the work that you do. I joke with my daughters, but I don't really be joking. Everybody that comes to them is going through something. So it's yeah, so the spirit to be able to move in and out of that, not be impacted by it. So, I applaud what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Couple, three more issues in that line, things that we don't have a lot of control over. The disproportionate number of black men who are incarcerated, the disproportionate number of black men who are street homeless, and the fact that they have very few avenues to establish a physical address. And you don't necessarily have to answer that. I'm just giving you some other things that create a situation where fathers are absent. And then, of course, there's always conflict, family conflicts that occur. So there's a lot to overcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Once again, yeah, things that we can't necessarily control on a macro level. And so I say for those things that we can't necessarily control. So when people come to me and they say, you know, the burden of the world is on my shoulders, right? I'm feeling so heavy about the war in Ukraine. I'm feeling so heavy about these different things that we literally have no control over. For those individuals, I typically tell them to sit with themselves and feel all the burden and pain of those people. Just sit there and feel it. And as you feel it, also think about, what is my role in this? So for your question, yes, there's not much that we can do about all of those things. But what is your role in supporting a solution for it? And that's where our power comes in. If each person would just focus on their part, nobody's asking you to solve the problems for the world, but they are asking you to support someone in your world, right? So what can you do? What is in your power when you think about these things? So is it mentoring? Is it supporting someone? Is it calling your cousin that you haven't talked to in a long time? What is your small part around the things that you cannot control? So, yeah, thank you for your time.
Yeah, Ryan, thank you. All right. Yes, sir. Ryan, I wanted to present to you this certificate in celebration of men. This certificate and application is presented to Ryan Washington by me, the founder of the Jefferson Street Sound, Lorenzo Washington, on June the 2nd, 2024. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna take 5 minutes before you come up, Robert, and then we'll bring you right on